11th class economics students, Assalamu alaikum. As told you in our previous lecture that liberalization, privatization and globalization are three major components, or we can say the elements of new economic policy of 1991. In today's lecture, we will discuss the aspect of liberalization and the economic reforms taken under liberalization. Dear students, liberalization means movement towards a free market system, or we can say the loosening of government regulations in a country to allow for private sector to operate business transactions freely or with fewer restrictions. Coming to the liberalization of Indian economy, it means to free the economy from the direct or physical controls imposed by Indian government before 1991. Students, as already discussed that before 1991, Indian government had put many types of controls and restrictions on Indian economy like industrial licensing system, foreign exchange controls, price controls on goods, import license, restrictions on investment by big business firms, etc. However, with the passage of time, it was experienced that several shortcomings had crept into the economy on account of these restrictions. These controls had breeded corruption and inefficiency in the Indian economy and consequently led to fall in economic growth of India. So, in order to make Indian economy more flexible and take it on a high growth path, economic reformers with liberalization as their main component were adopted to reduce restrictions and regulations by the government and thereby move the Indian economy towards a free market system. These reforms were based on the assumption that market forces could guide the economy in a more better and effective manner than government control and regulations. The economic reforms taken under liberalization are categorized under four heads like industrial reforms, financial reforms, fiscal reforms, and external sector reforms. Now let us first discuss the industrial sector reforms under liberalization. Students, liberalization implied the deregulation of industrial sector of the economy, that is to minimize the government regulations and restrictions imposed on the industrial sector of India. In this connection, the government of India announced a new industrial policy on 24 July 1991. This new policy abolished the requirement of licensing except for only 6 industries, which are liquor, cigarette, defense equipment, industrial explosives, dangerous chemicals, and drugs and pharmaceuticals. With this, about 85% of the industry was taken out of the government licensing framework. Under a new industrial policy of 1991, the areas previously reserved for the public sector were narrowed down and greater participation by private sector was permitted in core and basic industries. Under the new industrial policy, the number of industries reserved for public sector were reduced from 17 to only 8. Rest all the industries were opened for private sector. At present, only 2 industries, that is railways and atomic energy, are reserved for the public sector. Students, under liberalization measures, Indian industries were given freedom to import capital goods, that is, to buy machines and raw materials from foreign countries with a view to upgrade their technology and improve their efficiency. In the liberalized era, many production areas which were previously reserved for small-scale industries were de-reserved. Forces of the market are allowed to determine allocation of resources to different uses rather than the directive policy of the government. Moreover, industries were also given freedom to diversify their production capacities. Earlier, government used to fix the maximum limit of production capacity. No industry could produce beyond that limit. Now, the industries are free to decide their production by their own choice on the basis of market requirements. Now, coming to the financial sector reforms, under liberalization, students' financial sector includes banking and non-banking financial institutions, stock exchange market and foreign exchange market. In India, financial sector is regulated and controlled by the central bank, which is known as the Reserve Bank of India. Liberalization implied a substantial shift in the role of the Reserve Bank of India from a regulator to a facilitator of the financial sector. Prior to liberalization, that is in the pre-reform period, Reserve Bank of India acted as a regulator of financial sector, and as a regulator, the Reserve Bank of India fixed interest rate structure for the commercial banks by itself. However, after liberalization, its role has been changed from regulator to facilitator. And as a facilitator, the Reserve Bank of India would only facilitate the free play of the market forces and leave it to the commercial banks to decide their interest rate structure. Or we can say now the competition prevails rather than controls. Now market forces rather than controls decide the interest rate structure, volume and pattern of investment. In connection of financial sector reforms, the Governor of Reserve Bank of India established the Narsimham Committee in August 1991 to recommend changes to the financial system. On the basis of recommendations of Narsimham Committee, it was proposed to cut down SLR, that is statutory liquidity ratio, from 38.5% to 25% within a time span of 3 years. Cash reserve ratio was also reduced from 15% to 10%, and market forces were allowed to dictate interest rates instead of the government. Banks were also allowed to relocate their branches and open up new branches. Free play of the market forces has thus led to the emergence of private bankers, both domestic as well as international, in the Indian banking system. Liberalization has also allowed foreign institutional investors like merchant banks, mutual funds, etc. to invest in Indian financial system. Now, coming to the fiscal reforms adopted under liberalization, students' fiscal reforms relate to revenue and expenditure of the government. A key element in the stabilization effort in 1991 was to restore fiscal discipline of the economy. As already told you in previous lecture that during 1990 to 91, fiscal deficit of India was as high as 8.4% of gross domestic product. Hence, in the budget of 1991 to 92, bold steps were taken in the direction of correcting fiscal imbalance of India, which contemplated a reduction in fiscal deficit by nearly 2 percentage points of gross domestic product, that is from 8.4% of GDP in 1990-91 to 6.5% of GDP in 1991 to 92. Some of the important policy initiatives introduced in the budget for the year 1991-92 for correcting fiscal imbalance were reduction in fertilizer subsidy, abolition of subsidy on sugar, reduction in non-planned and non-development expenditure by the government, and acceptance of major recommendations of the Tax Reform Committee headed by Raja Chilai. The Chilai Committee recommended to raise revenue, that is the government revenue, through better compliance in case of direct as well as in case of indirect taxes, and make the tax structure more stable, moderate and transparent. Dear students, prior to liberalization, tax structure in the economy has been highly complicated and taxes were very high. Fearing a heavy burden of taxation, people would often evade the payment of taxes, which is called a tax evasion. So, in order to prevent the people from tax evasion, taxes were reduced after liberalization and the procedure for paying tax was simplified and moderated. Now coming to external sector reforms, it includes foreign exchange reforms and foreign trade policy reforms. One of the important measures undertaken to improve the balance of payment situation of India was the devaluation of Indian rupee against foreign currencies. Devaluation implies a fall in the value of Indian rupee in relation to other foreign currencies, say in relation to US dollar or Britain pound. In the very first week of July 1991, the Indian rupee was devalued by around 20%. This devaluation increased the supply of foreign currency into the Indian economy by way of higher exports of domestic goods and services, and by this way, the crisis of foreign exchange reserves were resolved. Followed by devaluation in 1991, the exchange value of the Indian rupee in the international money market, or we can see in the foreign exchange market, was left to the free play of the market forces. Currently, exchange rate is determined by the forces of demand and supply in the international exchange market. Under foreign trade policy, the main focus was on greater openness of Indian economy. New initiatives were taken in trade policy to create an environment which provide a stimulus to our exports and at the same time reduce the degree of regulation and licensing controls of foreign trade by the government. In this connection, quotas on the imports of important machinery and manufactured intermediate goods were removed. A large part of the import licensing system was replaced by tradable import entitlements linked to export earnings. There was also a significant cut in tariff rates, with the peak tariff rate reduced from 300% to 150%. Thus, we can say post-liberalization, competition replaced the protection of industries. The government also took several measures to promote foreign investment in India. For example, in 1991, the government announced a specified list of high technology and high investment priority industries, wherein automatic permission was granted for foreign direct investment up to 51% foreign equity, which means that non-resident Indians and foreign investors were permitted to invest in Indian companies. The limit was then raised to 74% and subsequently to 100% for many of these industries. Moreover, many new industries have been added to the list over the subsequent years. Foreign Investment Promotion Board has also been set up to promote and bring foreign investment in India. So these were some of the reforms adopted by Indian government in 1991 to liberalize Indian economy. It is because of these reforms that we have seen a significant boom or rise in those areas that were liberalized. Technological advancement took place in India because of these reforms, and gross domestic product growth rate of India has shown a significant rise over the subsequent years. Thank you.